Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today, we are climbing back down into the bunker, this time, Volume 2, Issues 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
I had to work really hard not to say 5 to 10, which is very misleading.
It's just off by one on this one. But yeah, it's the next 5 issues here. So,
well, technically, you read until 10, but you do not read through 10. So I think that is the semantic thing that I keep getting hung up on. I'm like, when you get to 10, stop. But 5 to 10 makes people, I would think, want to read 10 as well.
When you say when you say numbers like that, the understanding is you
Human English
is read through the final number, not up to that number. So, but yeah. So I mean, we have it knowing that the issue that the series is effectively halfway done now. From a plot standpoint, I think we see there's still a lot of setup happening. We're getting a lot of pieces in place, a little more revelations. I think this volume is very Natasha heavy in that we see not only the fact that she also came back in time in the bunker with Grady, but we see more of her role in I guess what we'll call the upcoming apocalypse. Right, we see her role that yes, she does end up as Grady's wife, as the first lady. Once Grady's elected president, but prior to that, she's working with Daniel at his agricultural pharma company. Right, he's there,
right.
She's there, but. And this goes into the idea of what kind of time travel story is this. The reason she shows up there, her motivation is showing up there is based on the revelations that were given to them in their letters. She shows up to Daniel and be like, hey, according to everything we know, you're going to do something that kills the world. So what we need to do is get ahead of that. We need to figure out how to do this now so it doesn't kill the world. And the one little moment they have, which I really like, I like this kind of self-aware moment when she has this this kind of epiphany or this hypothesis about was it goose eggs, something like that? Like you inoculate a goose egg.
Picture of a swan. First of all, that's like really the first moment of funny writing,
like
in
straight
a
up
pretty
comedy.
serious series. Because I did laugh out loud. He was like, first of all, that's a swan.
It's a swan. Yeah. But
totally a mistake I would make, by the way.
But in that moment, though, what Danielle and Natasha realize is in order to do this, in order to create something that is inoculated against this deadly virus that wipes out 2/3 of the world, they have to make the virus.
Right.
So,
well, and there's all kinds of tricky time travel things here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my question, and this is jumping a little bit toward the end, but
sure.
At the end of this arc.
This volume,
We're not spoiling anything beyond this. But when there's this debate about stopping the second bomb, and it's like, okay, we're going to do this, before, the old one intervenes. But when they're going to do this, I'm like, my understanding of it, and we're just totally going to get into another time travel discussion because this book begs us to.
Yeah.
My understanding is when you go back in time and it's not a closed loop and you say, okay, I'm going to stop this one bomb and then I'm going to stop the world from ending. The potential of stopping one major event like that changes every other event that comes afterwards.
Yes.
You just burnt the playbook for everything that comes afterwards. Like all your future knowledge is wasted once you take one major deviation like that.
Yes. Yeah. And
possibly even a much smaller deviation.
Absolutely.
Two people don't sleep together and all of a sudden the world's of ending the world don't pan out the way they thought it was going to.
Yeah. Or it still does in a completely different way that you can't.
Right, you no longer have any sovereignty over it. You get one bullet in that gun.
But there's also that idea in those types of stories and those kind of branching stories. Again, it goes back to Back to the Future, that the mere act of going back in time changes things. It's impossible to be an outside observer if you are someone who travels through time. that your mere presence affects things. And I think that that's even a line that I think Doc Brown says, like just being here creates a set of circumstances that no party can predict or understand. Because yeah, it automatically it means that things are completely in flux, and so, but and so it would render any sort of plan of like let's send this information back. It renders any plan completely useless, theoretically,
Right.
because
Okay. I'm glad we're tracking. We're on the
yeah,
same
yeah,
page
yeah.
there.
Well, but okay, so but that's if this is that type of story. But again, what they're implying here, and what and by they I mean the older versions of the characters, which in this case I think we have to rely on Grady, older Grady and older Natasha, right? Because there was a little interesting bit there, right? Of we see how the bunker, some of the other functions of the bunker, one of them being like a handwriting replicator. So
Yes.
meaning that that you know they agreed to write these letters back themselves, but maybe they were doctored in some way because this machine can replicate, But then you think about what Heidi's letter was and how personal it was.
Isn't
But
that kind of what the auto pen is? Like you hear about presidents signing things with auto pens.
oh yeah, well yeah, for signature, yeah, it's a replicator like that. But here, this can replicate any sort of text in it based on a handwriting sample. But we have to go off of what older Natasha and older Grady say because we have no other perspective right now. Their understanding is we're going to go back. Their belief is we're going back to make things better, not necessarily to make things right, but like what is their idea of like we need to make sure the world exists at all, and if that means only a third of the world exists afterwards, that's better than none of the world existing, which is the track we're going on. So they seem to believe that there are things they can tweak that get to that outcome, but there are still things that have to happen, right? I guess Grady still believes he has to become president, meaning that first bomb, the one in San Francisco, the one they covered last week in Volume 1, that still has to happen, even though he knows what's going to happen and generally where it's going to be. That has to happen because he has to be photographed by Heidi in the paper. He has to be interviewed on the news, yada, yada, yada. And then what you alluded to here in this volume is this next attack, right? That's like, what, 72 hours later, allegedly 72 hours later in Los
Yeah, in
Angeles?
LA instead of San
Yeah.
Francisco.
Yeah,
And
a
yeah.
much larger bomb, supposedly, from what the those newspapers said, that like this like nearly annihilates Los Angeles, meaning that maybe it's like it's potentially like nuclear or something like that. But this also has to happen because these are steps, these are initial steps that need to be taken in order for Grady to ascend to whatever level of kind of political consciousness he needs to get there. And it's like, well, so these first steps have to happen, but once these happen, then we can start tweaking stuff. And then there's this idea, and all that does throw into question the entire basis of the plan, right? Because you're like, well, which is what they gotta get to,
Well,
right?
and even the question, even the characters are asking, is this a closed loop? Will
Exactly,
any
yeah.
of it matter?
Which is when we get to young Grady and young Billy, right? When they go, after they talk with old Grady, they talk about the bomb and like we have to go stop this thing, and older Grady is like, what are you gonna do? If you tell them there's a bomb and you show and you're there when they find you, like you're going to be arrested. Like that doesn't help anybody, But it appears, right? It appears that they stopped the bomb, and Billy does get arrested, and younger Grady climbs into like an air vent and is going to hide out for a couple days, and then set the bomb off later. So it's like, again, we're getting into this feedback loop here of, are these events being caused by the future versions of these people because they know they're supposed to happen? I think earlier than that, we when we get the flashback to Grady and Natasha when they first come back in the bunker, right? They come back like a month before the younger versions of themselves find it, and Natasha has like a freak out, like there's
Well, and a
not
lot of wasted days in that story, by the way.
yeah,
I
well,
mean, there
well
were like
yeah,
panels where days were just going by, and I was like,
well but
Well, I
I
thought
think
if we
that
were going to do this whole thing before the thing,
yeah,
between the things, that
well,
there would
but
have been a lot of rich material in there.
well, but I think that's what they're trying to get at here. I didn't mind that because I think what they're trying to show is that I think that whatever plan this is pretty flimsy too. But also, I think they felt like they would need more time to prep for things. And Natasha has that freak out like a week before, whatever the first bomb goes off, and she's like, "There is no chatter about this. Like, there's no way anybody can get a bomb into San Francisco for this to happen." And Grady has them, and we're like, "Well, then does that mean we do it?" And Natasha kind of rebuffs that, like, "No, we're not doing that." But yet we see them driving to LA later with whatever bomb they or the device they have in the back of the car, which I think is the bomb for LA. So again, it seems like they are influencing these events here that are only happening because they happened the first time, which would make sense for a closed loop story. Right.
Exactly.
This is Harry
Although,
across the
here's
lake.
my thing though.
But
It
the
is
problem.
there's no
Okay.
reason for characters to guard the timeline if you're in a closed loop system,
Well, yeah. Well,
right? I mean,
if everyone's aware it's a closed loop system, part of the
right.
idea of being in a time travel story that is closed loop is you aren't aware of it until
The
you've experienced
climax,
both ends
yeah.
of the loops.
Yeah.
Yeah, and until you've experienced so the younger versions of themselves as aware of it they can be, and you're right, they are asking those questions, but they are also asking those self-doubt questions of like, well, like with younger Natasha and younger Daniel, when they say like, hey, this is a way to combat this deadly virus that's going to wipe out chunks of the planet. But the only way for us to do that is for us to make the virus. So does that mean us trying to prevent it because we have future knowledge of it? Does that still cause it anyway? Is there no way for us to get out of this loop? And the characters are asking those questions, and as a reader, I would want my characters to ask those questions because I would want my characters to at least be as smart as me or as the audience. Have them pose those questions, even if they ultimately still make the quote unquote wrong decision, or even if they have decisions to make. If it's a closed loop system, then any choice they make is going to result in the same outcome anyway. But the idea that the older versions of these characters are starting to see how they would have influenced what kind of influence they had on past events, but yet also still thinking they can somehow change it. You know, there's a level of kind of hubris and maybe
Well,
ignorance or naivety there.
I think, I mean, if you're at the end of the loop and you have the ability to go back in time, now obviously the old characters know whether they've interacted with the old versions themselves before or not. So
and
that's
which they don't
information
see.
we don't have.
Well, but that's the thing though. As far as we know, yet the older versions of the characters writing letters back to their younger versions of themselves, they had no memory of reading those letters before.
Right. Yes.
Which
That is my understanding as
yes,
well.
which is the one kind of flaw in this closed loop system of the future influencing the past because it's closed loop. If old Natasha and old Grady going back in time are responsible for the bombs and all the threats that lead all of their younger selves on the steps on the path to them becoming who they will become in the future, then that means included in that is the finding of the bunker, which none of them, the older versions of themselves, didn't relay back, being like, because it would have been fairly easy to be like, I'm writing this letter to you because when I was your age, I read a letter to myself. Like I remember I'm writing what's in this letter, what I remember reading as a child when I was younger.
Right.
And but I guess if we had seen that, that would be like definitive confirmation to me that it's a full closed loop system. That
Well, and I
everything
think
that's
the attitude of the old ones would be like, yeah, I'm just doing this because it was already done and I have to do it.
Exactly. I'm doing it
Like
because I've
there would be a
already
certain
done it.
nihilism to it.
Yeah. Which plays into a lot of closed loop time stories, right? I'm doing this now in the future because I've already done it in the past. you know? And I have to do it because that's already been done. It does seem that on some level these letters from the future versions of themselves were written with some level of earnesty, right? Like they really think this is going to work. That they understand they screwed up, and this is a chance to get it right. And they didn't have this information beforehand, and so they think they are changing, or they had the possibility to change, which tells me that they didn't get these letters when they were younger, the older versions, which then would mean we're not in a closed loop, a true closed loop system, you know? So it's like they're, as of right now, for me, it's like they're playing with different potential versions of what kind of story this is, even though they can name check a closed loop time system, the characters can, that may be their perception of it, but as the reader, we're being given information that the characters don't have that might suggest that that's not quite true.
Right. Well, I mean, I think if I were to discover time travel, I would accept the possibility of a closed loop world, but I would try to live as if it isn't. I would try to live as if I can process this information and reach a new and logical decision. And if that's what I was always going to do,
Mhm.
so be it.
Yeah.
But I want to accept as much agency as possible.
Well,
And I think that's where these characters are. Like, yeah,
I
maybe it's that,
yeah.
but just in case it's not, and I can have any influence on these events at all, we're going to do that. We're going to take option B. And if it's closed, it's closed.
Well, I agree. I would like to think I'd act the same way as well, because I often think about this idea of like free will versus determinism, right? If every action is predetermined, then it, fundamentally it's the same for the person as if you have free will, you know? Because I think there's a mistake when people talk about if everything in life is predetermined, if it's all fate, then like, well, then I don't have to do anything. It just happens to me. And the response to that is,
Right.
then your fate is nothing happens to you. You know, fate, predetermination isn't things happening to you. It's the idea that the choices you have made are the choices you're going to make. It isn't if you
Well,
choose to do nothing, things still happen. If they do, then that means your destiny was to do nothing. Things
right.
just don't happen around you. That isn't what it is. And so fundamentally, it ends up being the same perspective wise. And it goes along with what you said there. You're right. Well, if everything I do doesn't matter, quote unquote, matter, doesn't change anything, well, but I'm going to do it under the auspice of that maybe it might, then that's still making an active choice.
Yeah, it's just
So,
not to get really dark, but that's
yeah.
essentially my rationale for voting.
Well, yeah,
It's
yeah,
like it's
yes,
like I don't remember the last time I backed a winner in a well, no, I do. Okay, I guess
yeah, yeah,
2020. It's just I wasn't like thrilled about my options, which
yeah,
that's also part of free will, by the way,
yeah,
is someone born in Indianapolis in 2000 has a very different set of options in front of them in terms of how their life could go than someone born, in England in 350 AD.
yes,
Your lifespan is determined by events outside your control.
hmm,
No act of your free will or volition will alter that drastically, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
you're not going to become a pilot or an astronaut if you're born 350 AD. So
yeah,
it's about like even when there is free will, it's not radically free. You're choosing
hmm,
within the constraints of things that are outside of your control.
yeah, yeah.
And so
You're always within
I
some
think
sort of
that's
box.
why I worded it as like I'm gonna do the most I can within the set of options presented to me
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
see where that gets me.
Yeah, and if that's what you were always quote unquote supposed to do, if the outcome
Yeah,
was what was
then so
always
be
quote
it.
unquote supposed to happen, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And there's a little bit of,
Or not so be it. Really doesn't matter.
yes, yeah.
Like it or not.
There's a
Yeah.
level of fatalism to that I suffer from. I don't know if that's the right word, but yeah, I have this idea of like,
Oh, I
um,
enjoy it.
yeah, but
Yeah.
but it is the idea of like, um kind of the things that happen and occur in life, whether they are of your choice or of your doing or your circumstance. I mean, you can fight against it all you can, and you might win, you might not. But there's a level. It's not about just like accepting where you are, but like an understanding, almost like a bit of being at. I don't know about saying like I'm at peace with it, but it's kind of hard to word from in my mind because it isn't just like accepting things as they are, but it's just an understanding of like these are the parameters in which we are stuck with, and trying to make the best choice in the moment for
Right.
whatever
And I
circumstance in
think
front of you,
there
and
are
being okay
people,
with that, and being okay with if that doesn't turn out in quote unquote your favor, right? If you make the best choice you can and it ends up screwing you because maybe you screwed up or something else happened to you, understanding that's what it was and being able to move on to the next choice,
right. And
you
I
know?
think there are people, and I'll just keep the election thing handy because
Yeah.
it's serviceable as an analogy here. But there are people who are like, well, if I can't have this choice, then I'm just not going to make any choices. And it's
Yes.
like, you're not a rule maker. You're a game
Yes.
player.
Yeah.
That's life.
Yeah.
You don't get to decide, which decisions will be in front of you and what your options will
Yeah.
be for everything. There
For
are
every,
some
yeah,
things.
not always, not
Um,
always. Yeah. Yeah.
but it is like I have liberal and conservative friends every election in the last 20 years who have decided to sit at home because they did not like the candidate put forth by their party. Um, Hypocrite that I am, some of those people I applaud and some of them I shame, uh, based on which affiliation they had. But
Yes. Yes.
um, but those are people who are saying, well, if I can't make the rules of the game, then I'm not participating in the game.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately they're they're either making way too much or way too little of their impact on the outcome. Like they're either
Oh,
making
I like that. I like that.
yeah,
Yeah. I
they're
like
either
that.
making way too much in that like their one vote will decide everything,
Hmm.
or they basically think their vote doesn't really matter anyway, so they can afford like they would rather have the luxury of feeling like this principled warrior than having compromised themselves to vote
Yeah.
when their vote won't really have a big impact anyway.
I hadn't thought about that. That you're right. That they're on those. That is on that extreme there um,
Yeah, most opinions are a full circle. Like if you go
yeah,
so far in one direction, you come
that's
back
true. You
around
come back. That is
the
true.
other
That is
way.
true.
Which
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
heard someone saying that it was on the West Wing Weekly podcast. They had some some foreign relations person on talking about free trade issues, and he was saying, you know what, moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans tend to agree on free trade, and the further left you get, they become more tariff inclined because of a protectionist tendency, and the further right you get, the more pro tariff they get because of an isolationist tendency. But at the end of the day, whether you're motivated by protectionism or isolationism, you're pro tariff.
It
Like you
started
went
with
all the way
protest.
around the wheel. Yeah. And like as I fancy myself an intellectual, I still appreciate the distinction there, when people have different views.
well,
But there
well,
is the
and
pragmatic angle of like you
yes,
basically came around, you're advocating for the same thing
yeah,
while spewing vitriol to the person who
yeah.
essentially agrees with you.
It is quite literally though when you come around that way, you're at the same point, but you are literally coming at from different sides, and
Yes.
and that becomes more important
One of them
than the
is
understanding of what the common ground is.
one is the Canadian side of Niagara Falls and one is the like New
The North
York.
American side. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
But yeah, I mean,
one is much more breathtaking.
yeah, but it is. I mean, but these are the kinds of things I think. Again, because from a story standpoint, this book it's this is a mystery box story, right? We're trying to figure out what this timeline is and what it all means and how the past is influencing. Sorry, how the future is influencing the past, the present, whatever, however you want to call it, but how the future versions are influencing the younger version. We're seeing all that, and said there's a lot of setup in here. We're seeing where people are in the future versus how we see them immediately after finding this bunker. So from a story standpoint, it's really just a lot of setup here. But again, I really like some of the ideas here that the characters themselves. I like that the characters themselves are wrestling with the same ideas of time travel that the audience would be. And I think something we didn't quite mention last week, maybe just in passing, as soon as they find the bunker, someone makes a reference to Lost, right?
Yes.
And so what that tells me is that up until the moment that these young 20 somethings find the bunker, they are in a version of our world, meaning they are fluent in the same stories and pop culture and legends and lore and myth that we, the reader, are. So they would have read and have exposure to the same types of stories, the same references, the same touchstones that the reader has. And so their actions in a lot of ways would then be influenced by that. Because as you said, if you or I were to encounter some time travel phenomenon tomorrow, the way that we would understand that or try to begin to understand that and interact with that would be influenced by the up until that point fiction stories that we had consumed, right? Because time travel would have been fiction and made up until the moment that we saw proof of it being real. But our only understanding of it would to start out with would be based on the stories that we had consumed and the stories that we know. And I like that we're seeing our younger versions of our characters grappling with those same things, that they have the similar understanding that when faced with time travel, they are trying to work through the rules as well. They're trying to figure out how this works. Does it work? Can we change anything? Does anything we do actually change? Does it matter if it does? Does that mean we shouldn't try? All the things that you were saying, I like that the characters are grappling with that, because to me, that shows that's reflective of how I would like to imagine I would be, or how real people would be in our world if faced with this kind of situation. That they would be grappling and talking about these same types of ideas, and not just either accepting it outright or rejecting it outright.
Yes.
That they would grapple with the idea of maybe this is really important. Maybe nothing we do matters, but we're still going to try. We have to. We were sent this information for a reason. Our future selves sent this back for a reason. So, and they're telling us what we did was terrible. The end result was terrible. So if we can do something different that makes it just like a little bit less bad, is that worth trying? And if we still make it bad, according to our future selves, it can't get much worse.
Right. I mean, that is a silver lining of saying,
yeah,
2/3 humanity dies right away. Everyone else is like suffering, living in terrible conditions.
Yeah.
What's really the risk here?
Yes, and that's what they're grappling with.
We're
and
not gambling with,
yeah,
a third of the population died, we might make it worse. It's like, basically ended the human race.
Yeah.
So let's roll the dice.
Yeah. It's like we've apparently already lost. Like we lost by 31 points. So if we make a little bit of difference, and we lose by 14 points,
right?
Is that a little better? Maybe so. Maybe that helps your RPI in the rankings. You're straight in the schedule, but that's what they're saying is like the world is still going to be bad. Things are still going to be bad, but you're not going to end everything. You're not going to end existence. You make a couple of these changes here, and there's a chance that it's a little bit better, and it's better just enough that things survive. But at no point did anyone be like, you can avert calamity by doing this. So I think you're right that there is some freedom there in being like, but I think this is where someone like younger Billy is at, being like, well, why not try to avert all of it?
Right.
Why not stop all of it? And there's a level of older Grady, I think it's older Grady, who's basically be like, well, because I'm the person that needs to be in charge for this to be even a modicum better,
What? Yeah. Which? How does he know that?
Exactly. Well, and
Okay,
is that his
okay, okay.
ego?
We're meant to
That's it.
question that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that his ego? Is that his narcissism? Being which comes for a lot of leaders, right? That like if I'm not the one doing this, someone worse is going to be here, so I need to be doing this. You know, I need to be the one in charge. And
Right.
even
I may do some nasty things, but
yeah, there's
my
always someone
nastiness
worse.
is better than, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
better
Because
than your alternatives.
I know what I'm capable of, so I can stop before I go too far. But the other guy, he definitely can't. And so I think there's a level of Grady. Yeah, I think we're meant to question, you know, if he never becomes president, if he never runs for office, he never has political, leanings. What does that do to the timeline? And at some point, I think for me, if I were shown all these options, my thing would be like, I would like to think at some point I'd be like, well, these small changes that go from total annihilation to partial annihilation, like, what if we just shake the XXX clean entirely, you know, and try something entirely different? Because what's the worst that can happen? We could all be annihilated again. Well, but we did that already. And so what's the point of just trying a little, again, there's a kind of that fatalism creeping into my own subconscious, this idea of like, well, why are we even trying to mimic any part of this path? What do we have
Right.
to
It's not
trust
like they were a
ourselves? Yeah.
few degrees off course the
Yeah,
way
yeah,
things
yeah, yeah.
went. It was
Yeah.
like they ought to try a totally different path. So yeah. So Grady not becoming president seems to me
Yeah.
a very obvious first step.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a significant enough change that
Daniel,
he by himself can control.
yeah, same with Daniel and Natasha. Instead of worrying about what developing this pesticide insect resistant crop will do, just don't develop anything.
By the way, did
Just
I
walk
say
away.
this during our last issue that or episode that this was, I think, the second veiled reference to Monsanto that we've covered on this podcast?
Oh no, you didn't mention last week. No, no, but you're
Okay,
right. It
I
is.
thought
Yeah,
it because
yeah.
eugenic was that the one?
Was it eugenic? It was one of the
It
apocalyptic
was even
trilogies.
in St. Louis. Well, it
Yes.
wouldn't have been mimetic, I don't
No, not
think.
medic. It might have been. It might have
Eugenic is my
been. It might have
guess.
been eugenic. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um,
Because it
Either
wouldn't have
way,
been cognetic either. Yeah,
right. Yes. So it had to be eugenic,
yeah,
but that one had the big time jump in it. So I,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, anyway.
But again, you're right. Grady could decide to take the biggest swing and just never run for office. You know, Daniel and
Yeah.
Natasha could just walk away from Aspire.
And from where I'm sitting, I don't
what-
see anyone that would be questioning Grady or upset with him now. I
Yes,
don't,
yeah.
have we heard like future Billy or anyone else other than Grady from the future say it's really important that Grady becomes president? Because I think
Uh,
that is a
well,
very telling omission.
I think it's implicit with Natasha being back there with him and helping him walk through some of
I
these
see.
steps.
Yeah.
That there's a
Okay.
little implication. Now, it does seem that future Billy, because he's a prisoner, and eventually he dies apparently. But yeah, we see a confrontation between older Grady, older Natasha, and older Billy when he's like being held in whatever, like a jail cell or whatnot. So clearly, whatever happened is like, there's a major fissure there, and obviously we see a little bit of older Heidi and older Daniel. Older Heidi apparently is like a wanted fugitive, which Daniel sells
Well,
her
we're
out. We
starting to
see a
get the
little bit of that.
backstory of that.
Yeah, it's it. We're getting a little. She still feels a little more on the outside, but it does seem to be wrapped up with her past trauma. Something about her uncle, like she was like tased through that earpiece, and Grady says something about like we got to take her to her uncle or something like that. So like
Which was a messed up last sentence to hear.
yeah. Well, but it seems to be because like we see her go to Des Moines, right? And confront her uncle. Her uncle has no idea who she is, but he's not, he's trying to beg for his life by admitting the things he's done. Like, I know I'm a terrible person, blah, blah, blah. And she threatens and tortures him, but ultimately leaves him alive. It appears something was, quote unquote, supposed to happen. I guess maybe he's supposed to kill her.
No,
Sorry,
she's supposed to kill him,
yes,
which
yes,
we
somehow,
know
yeah,
from her
yeah.
letter.
Yeah, yes,
Like
yeah,
she
yeah,
told herself
yeah.
that she did it, so
That's right. I
now
try. I
she
misspoke.
has
She's
veered off the path.
which is
She knowingly veered off the path.
why I think what Grady and Natasha are saying, like, we got to take her back there because she has to kill him, which maybe that's what sets in motion her like being a fugitive, you
But
know?
in your mind, does that clean it up? Like you were supposed to kill him at this time in this place in this way in this
See,
date,
see,
and
I
you
don't
didn't
think
do
so.
it, so we'll clean it up. Okay, me
Yeah,
either.
because it's the same thing with young Grady and young Billy with the bomb in L.A. You know, presumably by them ripping the wires out, they stopped the bomb from going off at that moment. But we
Right.
know that young Grady is still hiding nearby in an air vent, and he was told he's got like provisions for a couple days. So presumably he's going to be told to still set off that bomb. And young Grady so far is the most inclined to follow the path laid out for him by his older self. So
I
that
mean,
may still
climbing up in
happen.
that vent was a dirty move anyway.
Yeah, and leaving
Um,
Billy behind to get arrested. You
right.
know, so it's like there's maybe part of the start of this fissure that's going to happen how many years in the future. So yeah, I don't know if it's a matter of it because it didn't happen at this moment. Maybe it just needs to happen at all, and so that's why older Grady and older Natasha have to take young Heidi back to Des Moines because like this has to happen because this needs to happen in your past in order for then B, C, E, and D to happen afterwards. But I think it was telling that Heidi didn't do that. That
Yes.
she
Knowing
appeared to make a choice.
has
She
already done it.
Yeah, she was
She didn't do
tempted.
it.
She was tempted, chose not to, and then apparently will now be put in a position where she may be forced to do it now. You know?
Yeah, and it's not really an act of compassion.
No,
I'm not sure what motivates it other than perhaps a defiance against this notion of she has to because she did.
exactly what I was thinking. It wasn't because she had a crisis of consciousness. It wasn't because she was like, no, this isn't right. This isn't moral. I
Right.
don't think it had
Yeah, it
anything to
was
do with
not
that.
the,
Yeah.
many deserve to live and die and,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Gandalf
Yeah. Can you
speech.
choose which one's which? No, I don't. Yeah, I'm with you. It had no moral standing. I think it was her thinking about what Grady did with the bombing in San Francisco, that he knew what could happen
And
and
she's going to
chose
do the
not
opposite.
to and
Yeah.
be part of and be part and follow the path. I think she had a flash of that and being like, well, I can't like her moral high ground was that moment, not the killing. It was I can't come down on Grady for acting with foreknowledge because this letter told me to do and then do the same thing. So I think maybe that's why she went with the torture route, right? Kind of cutting his face up and letting him know that she knows and I know where you live and trying to meet like an intermediate step, you know?
Yeah. Now
And
the
that's what
really
needs to
interesting
work.
thing
But
would be if she wasn't supposed to kill him, her future self knows that, but her future self knows the only way to get her not to is to tell her that she will, and she's so defiant.
yeah,
But again, that future self would only know that because it was in the letter she got, and then she
yes.
would just be kind of riffing on the memory and
Or yeah, again, or just knowing that again, future self knowing that when I read this letter, this is what's going to happen to me. I'm going to go there. I'm going to I read for my older self that I killed him. And I'm going to go and I'm going to walk up the door and be so close and I'm not going to do it. I'm going to walk away. But in the end, that's still going to lead to him dying or me killing him through some other roundabout way, like maybe through older Natasha and older Grady, right? It's like older Heidi knew that she has to go through that, but just gave the information that she knew her younger self would need.
exactly.
And
Yes.
and then that then again brings into the question of if you're the younger version of yourself and you're reading this letter, how much stock can you put in to the things that you've been told back to yourself? Even older Grady says something about that, right? Because younger Daniel's when he reads in his letter, he's like the thing you made ended the world, but you were pressured by Grady and blah 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 blah. And younger Daniel's defiant about that. And older Grady's like, yeah, that's the letter you wrote for yourself from your perspective. Like calling into question the bias of what can you and can't you believe from like if you write a letter to your past self, like you can't be objective. There's no way.
Right.
So
Well, I
so
mean, yeah.
so yeah, so again, them calling it out, having someone in story calling out, being like, that's just the way that you see it, But like, so obviously you trust yourself, but like, doesn't mean that's the objective truth. And I'm not saying that Grady's providing the objective truth, but he is providing the counter argument of just, what can you trust, even if it's information being relayed back? Like, how do you know that your future self isn't trying to manipulate your past self, because things still need to happen in a certain way, because they know these are the triggers that'll get you to do the things that you need to do, supposed to do, destined to do, whatever. You just because it's you doesn't mean you should blindly follow it. And I like that someone is questioning these things, and it's ultimately unknowable from their perspective. So, which then goes back to what you said earlier of, well, then it still just comes down to your choice. What are you going to do?
Yes.
Do you choose to act? Do you choose to be active and make a choice, whether or not it's predestined or not, whether or not it's based on information from your future self that you don't know if it's true or not? Are you making an active choice or a passive one? And it seems like, for the most part, our characters are making active choices that may still lead them to ruin and the world to ruin, but they are at least, having these discussions and deciding to act. But yeah, if it's a closed loop system,
yeah, and these characters would not be worth following if they weren't like that.
Well, of course, yeah. Well, I mean, but I think you get a little bit. You do get a little bit of Heidi, right? Heidi, I think, is meant to be kind of an outside attractor of her trying to opt out, and maybe we see through her character what trying to opt out ends up being, if she's opting out, but then older Natasha and older Grady keep prodding her back in, So then the idea that outside forces, things beyond your control, are forcing your hand now, so that maybe you even can't opt out,
Right.
if that's what the system is. And so just seeing what level of manipulation these future versions of the characters have and what effect they have on the story, may or may not have on the story. Like, are they causing these things because they were the things that happened, which means you're just stuck in a big loop, which means none of their plan is going to work, theoretically. If they cause these things because they need initial steps to happen, then how can one little change down the line ultimately have that much effect? Like you said, like, why not try to make the big swing and try the complete unknown versus the semi-unknown? Because that's the path they're going on. They're going down the semi-unknown path of, we know what happens if we turn right and then turn left. But what if we turn right and then turn slightly left instead, as opposed to just turning left the first time?
Right.
Which would be, in my mind, the idea of like, let's just reset the whole thing and try over. If we have the ability to try again, let's just try an entirely new set of choices, because that first one clearly didn't work.
Should we talk about like the Doctor Strange Infinity War moment of it all? Like, because the number of like 1.43 million simulations he runs or whatever. I assume that he is not the type of person to run simulations where it's like, okay, well, we're going to run the same exact one as last time, but this time I parted my hair to the left instead of the right.
Yeah,
I assume he's coming up with much more major variables than that.
I think, I think that line,
even though there's no telling, like,
yeah,
you don't know what a major variable is.
I think that line gets parsed, I think, a little too much in nerddom. The way that I understand it is that whatever number that is, 1.7 million, that's distinct outcomes, not choices, not like varying timelines.
I see.
That is the different outcomes of how things ultimately end, you know?
And
And
only
they
one of
lose, and
those is acceptable to him.
yeah, where they actually win. Meaning a lot of those maybe losses, but like partial victories, but it's still ultimately a loss. Like, yeah, I don't think it's possible. I don't read it as possibilities of like, yeah, like this person dies in battle versus not dying in the battle, and the end is the same, but one person is alive. It's like actual different outcomes, and in all of them, they lose in the grand scheme of things. But how they lose, why they lose, things like that are those are the things that are different. Yeah, and not the small changes that keep the same end. It's what the different ends are, and only one of them is an actual win. That's the way that I read that line, whether or not that's intended or not. But to me,
No,
that's
no, I
also the
think
way
that's fair.
that's the
But
way that ends the argument. Yeah,
well, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
my thing was, uh, I think my understanding may have come from like Jason Concepcion in Binge Mode, although I don't think it is. Mine was that he just kept running different scenarios until he found a winning one, and
it could be.
one out of 1.43 million or whatever is not even necessarily. He's not claiming that's a representative ratio
Yeah,
of how many possible scenarios and how many possible wins. He's just saying, look, I stopped when I found a way that we can win that I'm
yeah.
pretty sure we can execute. So we're gonna do that. Um,
And that's fair too. And it took me 1.1 million to get there. Yeah, that could be. Yeah,
right. So, and I think it's fair to, take a Gatorade break after 1.43 million,
yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah,
whatever,
yeah. But that's the kind of thing, though, of if the bunker is not a closed loop story, right? If the idea that any of these changes, stopping one of these bombs, Heidi not killing her abusive uncle, if any one of these things can change what the ultimate outcome is, and maybe those ultimate outcomes, yeah, maybe it's not 2/3 of the world dies and 1/3 lives. Maybe it's 2/3 lives and 1/3 dies. That's better. Still not good though, right? But it's
right,
better than what we had before. So is that acceptable? Is that what the future versions of them trying to say? Because it very much feels like the world has to end on some level, but humanity doesn't have to end. And it's like they're trying to save humanity, knowing that the world is gone either way. And it's just like, well, then why not try and go for the big swing and see what happens? Because if doing the same thing again leads to total annihilation, then like you said, like what's the risk in just trying again, like a whole brand new clean slate, because it can't get much worse. And so, yeah, I wonder again. This goes back to what the motivation of the future versions of these characters really are. What are they? What do they think they're actually trying to accomplish or tried to accomplish with the bunker before Grady got in there? Now, I guess there's an argument to be made, and there's a little bit of this kind of hinted at in this volume, that they were building this thing. They were all doing this like under Grady's nose, right?
right.
I I would imagine, because if they change anything, Grady doesn't become president. And so this is where I think some of that narcissism, that egoism comes in, that he's trying to go back and change things where he's still in control versus maybe what the original intent of the bunker was, which was starting over entirely, uh, including, Grady not being president, Grady not being important, Grady not rising to this position of power, not being the leader of the remaining free world and all that. And maybe that was unacceptable to Grady, which is why he interceded and ultimately took over the bunker and convinced Natasha to go back with him to make these small changes. So maybe what we're meant to be thinking about is that the motivations we're seeing from Grady, older Grady and Natasha, were not the original motivations for what the bunker was trying to do. Maybe the bunker was originally trying to be an entire clean slate, but because President Grady interceded, then maybe that's now what's putting the motivations in a bit of a murkier situation now.
Yeah, that is an interesting take. Well, I suspect in the next volume we will start to like see these things start to converge because once you're past the halfway point,
Yeah.
you should be done with setup pretty soon. And
You hope you're on the downside of the roller coaster hill, right? You start bringing more things together, um, introducing less new stuff, probably, right? That's what you hope for, right? You want to start tying things up. You want to start answering some questions or putting things in place that
right,
that takes us to the end. Yeah,
I was I was about to misuse the word denouement, but that's I think that is actually the end. I guess what I'm thinking of is like kind of the rising action and catastrophe that is
yeah.
supposed to happen in good storytelling, which would mean something with our characters. They think they've got it all figured out and things are going their way. And right before, volume three-ish ends, it all goes off the rails
The rug gets pulled out.
and
Sure.
it's
Yeah,
somehow worse than it was before they had intervened at
yeah.
all.
And then
And
then
they have to try to find something to save.
and then that's what I say. You would think then the fourth volume is them deciding to try to fix what they have here, roll with it, and accept their fate because that's what fate tells them it is, or do they still think they have a chance to change it? Yeah, I think that's a very standard kind of story arc there. I think it's kind of you can
I
particularly
think
see with this. Yeah.
Grady is the kind of character who will die to change the timeline. Like I think I'm not saying who will die. I'm just saying
Are,
he has the ego that he will not accept the closed loop, even if it kills him. Like I
you
think he
think
will
Grady
push
is
and
that
push
way?
it gets it.
You think Grady is
Well,
that way?
it's giving him the ego as the president
Yeah.
to because I think when you are the president of a country, you have a really hard time when you are told something is outside of your control.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, uh, obviously, he didn't create the virus slash has the ability to not create it or uncreate
Well,
it or
not
create a
directly.
remedy to
Yeah.
it. Right. So I think there are even stronger willed characters in the group, but I was just saying Grady in particular, you go from sitting behind, the desk in the Oval Office, being able to, nuclear codes, order strikes, things like that, to think that I can't go back in time and change one small event or, one chain of events, I think would literally drive him insane.
I think I think he's the kind of person that would not die for making sure that things change. Like he's
No,
the
I'm not
person
saying
that would
he's the type of guy to
he's
lay
the
down
person
across
that
the
would kill
barbed
for it.
wire.
He's the person that
Well,
would kill for it. He's the one that would go to extremes to make sure that his version of the world that he wants to see comes through.
yeah, no, I
Even
guess what
to
I'm
the
saying
detriment
is
of everyone else.
it's not a matter of whether he would die for it, because I don't think he would sacrifice himself willingly like that.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm just saying, I think it would kill him not to be able to have the kind of power to change things.
Okay.
Like,
Okay. Yeah.
I
All right.
think he would die of that,
He
whether
would
that kills him directly or he
he's the one
just,
that would go to extremes.
well,
Yeah,
or if he's the
because
one who's the first one to hit the wall, realize it's a closed loop,
yeah.
I think he'd throw in the towel. He would just
Maybe.
become
Maybe.
so downtrodden or whatever. And
Is he meant to be seen as the antagonist right now, as the bad guy, President Grady? It feels like it feels like right now through two volumes,
as
right?
much as there is one,
That is true. That is true. But it does
it's
feel
not
like
that clean.
because the way he comes back and he's so brusque with the younger versions of
He's
himself and his
definitely a
friends.
despicable person,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So is that
but
enough to
presumably
be
back
seen?
here to do a good thing. So I
Yeah,
think it's like, yeah, I like
but
if you
do you
had to
think
pick
he's
one
meant
at
to be
this
seen
point,
that way?
yes, I think.
Okay.
Well, you're definitely not supposed to like him,
Yeah,
um,
and he's not
which
meant to be
means
the
every
hero.
time he listens to Grady or young Grady listens to him,
Yeah.
young Grady becomes less likable by the transitive property. So I do think
Yes.
there is that to
Which
grapple with.
that's all intentional. I think absolutely. I think
Oh
you're
yeah,
meant
no,
you're meant
it's
to be
all
reading that.
intentional,
Yeah. Yeah.
but not the most flattering portrait of our character.
That is true. That does speak volumes of old Grady then. If what we're every time we see young Grady struggle. I think we're meant to see him struggle with these choices, but ultimately side with old Grady every time. It's meant to feel like he's being corrupted little bit at a time.
Yes.
Because we see him struggle with. It'd be different if because he does accept that these things are real pretty quickly. Probably because he's told he's going to be president. He's like, well, yeah, it sounds great. But we see him struggle with trying to do the things he's quote unquote supposed to do. I think that struggle is meant to be real for young Grady. And every time he acquiesces, it's like he loses a little bit of humanity, a little more of his soul, a little of his likability. And because that influence is coming from the older version of himself, yeah, it does taint old Grady as like, well, he is infecting a younger version of himself, a younger version that maybe could have been pretty good, that maybe has some good qualities there, that maybe would have been fit for a leader, political or otherwise. That maybe he did have some of this innate characteristics in him, but because he's being influenced by the sins of the future, then like it's like he doesn't stand a chance, you know. But
Yeah.
we see what he could have been if old Grady wasn't an influence, wasn't literally there whispering in his ear.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, I've still like to be clear, I don't think there's a character here that I love in terms of like, oh, I'm really rooting for them. They're the good guy. I want them to win. Like, I
Yeah,
don't
I
think this
agree.
book offers one of those.
Yeah, I don't think we
It's
have.
not
I don't
just
think we
that
have a good
I'm
thing
not
there.
connecting with it and they're trying. Like,
Yeah,
they're not trying to sell me on that type of
I
story.
I would say right now there's no one. Yeah, there's no one I'm whose side I'm on. But of the five of them, I think I'm rooting for Heidi, which I think is
Okay.
meant to be intentional too. Um, I'm not saying she is
Well, you're rooting for
good
her
or
because of everything so far, or because of her latest decision to
I
deviate from what she knows she's supposed to do?
I think for that now, and because it seems that uh, because of whatever choice she has made, that because it ends with that line that old Grady has to old Natasha about take it to her uncle, which just means at that point she's being now directly manipulated against her control. It is one thing for old Grady to call young Grady and be like, "This is what you got. Listen, man, you got to do this." And he's talking to him directly and saying this, and young Grady still has a level of choice to it and chooses to act. But where we leave this volume here is that Heidi has lost that agency, which goes, ties back to that childhood trauma there. So this idea of her choices are now being taken away because the next thing that happens to her, wherever she ends up, is not of her doing or her choosing. That is being manipulated for it. So in that sense, she is a character I'm rooting for because regardless of if they choose to end the world or not, I would rather see characters like Daniel and Natasha make a choice, even if it's a foolhardy one or a naive one. They're actively choosing, we're going to try and do this. If that still screws up, it still screws up. Heidi, because she's opted out, like I want her to be able to opt out to see what that is. Instead, it appears she's going to be manipulated some more, and so that's why I'm rooting for her character, not because she is particularly likable or moral or like the best of them, but because like she seems to be getting screwed over the most right now. That's why, and
Right.
and not of her doing, not of her doing. She continues to get screwed over due to
And
forces
we haven't
against her
seen
will.
anything outside of strictly in the future of old Heidi.
Except we see her when she meets Daniel when she's clearly on the run, and we find out that Daniel, because he made a deal with Grady, sells her out to the cops. You
Right, but
know?
that's not like way, way future, is it? I mean, it's like 5 years after Annihilation or something.
Yeah. So
And
so
I
so that
assume old Grady's coming from much further than that. I
yes,
don't
yeah,
remember
because
when.
uh 14 some odd years, I think is what
Oh,
how the book
that's
opens.
actually not crazy, given how old and decrepit he looks.
Well, but we don't
Um,
know, we don't know yet when the
when the
annihilation
Annihilation
happens.
event is, yeah, okay,
But
yeah, yeah, that's
but,
fair.
but we can do some math though, right? If they're in their early 20s now, and he has to be elected president, he's got to be at least, was it 45
35.
for president? 35?
I
It's
believe
in
so.
Senate 35? I thought it's 45 for president.
Hold for U.S. president. Gonna Google. At least 35 years old and have been a
Okay.
resident of the United States for 14 years, which doesn't make any sense to me because you also have to be a natural born citizen. I guess you could be a natural born citizen and then
And
go
then
live in Germany for 20
you've lived
years.
out of, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's
No.
just say
Well, I mean,
conservatively,
that is,
20 years.
yeah,
Conservatively
to be
20
clear,
years
that's the
before.
legal definition. I'm not sure
Yeah,
you're allowed to be younger than 70 now.
yeah,
But
well, that's true. But we're in a fictional timeline here. Things can
that's
be
true.
different
Yeah.
here.
This is
Yeah.
before they went off into the darkest timeline that we're in.
Yeah. Their timeline's still seemingly more hopeful than ours right now. But yeah, so conservatively, 20 years before he becomes president, and then sometime during his term, the annihilation happens. So it could be 30 years in the future from where they are now, and then 10, 12 years into the annihilation before they start coming back. And so you're looking at 45 to 50 years in the future. So they could be in their, Grady and Natasha being in their 60s, late 60s, early 70s, you know, prime age to run for president again at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably where they are. But yeah, but you're right. That scene with Natasha is early in the annihilation because Daniel is still trying to work on fixing it, So we don't know why she's on the run, and we don't know what happens to her afterwards. Although I think they mentioned she was on death row.
Although,
So
yeah, and key distinction here, he's working at that scene. He is working on fixing the science of it, not the timeline.
yes.
The,
Yeah.
the
He's trying to
project,
fix it. Yeah.
yeah, the project that we're introduced to in issue 1 is to fix the timeline, so
Yes.
we know he doesn't fix the science.
Yes.
Or if
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
does, he has some revelation that's just too little, too late.
Yeah. Maybe so.
And
Yeah.
if you could
Yeah.
send the solution back, that'd be one thing. But there's no
Yes.
reason to write letters to all of them if you just need to send the solution back. So
Yeah. So yeah. Presumably,
presumably
Daniel,
he's never solved it.
yeah, Daniel fails at that. But you are right. That is a key distinction that he's working out of like an apartment or a house. He's not working like in a major lab or something. So because of the fallout of whatever happened from the initial discovery or the initial findings, he's left kind of like doing what he can because he feels some level of guilt over that. But you're right. We don't know the specifics of Heidi's story and how she gets to where she ends up in that brief scene there. Being on the run from the cops, being ultimately arrested. And again, someone made an offhand comment about Heidi being on death row. And so potentially she has been executed or scheduled to be executed, something like that, for something that she did. So kind of knowing all that and then seeing where we leave her, she's the one character that I'm like, I would like good things for her to happen, or at least I would like less bad things to happen to her. But everyone else, everyone else, I'm not on the fence on it. Just like I want to see what happens in them. But Heidi right now is the one character that's like maybe cut her a little bit of slack a little bit. Everyone else can go through hell because they're clearly going to screw things up. But I want to see what her part in this is, because she, as of right now, is not someone who is a part of the future timeline, right? Because we see what Grady and Natasha and Daniel do. We even see what Billy does working behind the scenes. He's clearly big in the creation of the bunker and all that. So we know what part they play. We don't know what Heidi is. That's why she intrigues me.
I think that's a good take. I think I was hesitant about the Heidi character mostly because I was very worried, which I think was not very well hidden. I was very concerned about this plot device being used for her, which
And that's
they
fair.
had
Yeah.
immediately shown, like, oh, it was not just to put her in a box. It was not just to do this thing. It
Yeah.
was one, as you indicated, the clearest way to say no one else knows about this, so this letter's legitimate.
Mhm.
And it was the clearest thing of you can go test the timeline theory all by yourself. Like,
Yeah.
you kill him. So if
Yeah.
you go seek him out now and don't kill him, then this timeline is malleable. And at that point, as far as I'm concerned, you could burn the rest of the letter.
Yeah,
Because,
exactly. Yeah. And I think that may be what her thought is, but now that she's going to be taken by old Grady and old Natasha, you know. Again, it's the idea that like she made a choice and tried to walk away, but outside forces are bringing her back in.
Right.
So,
Um,
so meaning if you've got someone who has their finger on the scale, or in this case, two someones with their finger on the scale, then it, again, the if the ultimate end is the is still the same, does it matter if it's destiny? If it doesn't matter if it's a free will choice, does it matter if you're being manipulated? If all that matters is your perspective. If the end result's the same, the end result's the same. Whether she's forced to kill him or she's blamed to kill him, whatever it is, whatever outcome that Grady and Natasha clearly need and expect to happen, they're going to do everything they can to make that happen because they believe it's supposed to happen. Maybe that means they trigger it and make it happen, which again is that's a snake eating its tail right there. That's the vicious circle of going back in time. You're doing this because this thing is supposed to happen, and to make sure it happens, you're the one that causes it. It's whole chicken egg thing right there. So, yeah, this is where time travel gets a little messy, a little soupy.
yeah. Well, I think we definitely got in the mire this time. Although I enjoyed all of this discussion, and I am enjoying going through it at this pace
Yeah.
because I I think the book, I suspect, gets a lot less interesting if we were just like, oh, we're just gonna read all 19 issues of the Bunker.
Yeah.
And I think you lose a lot of these small moments, like Heidi not like
Mhm.
if we had done this in our, even dividing this into two trades at a time,
Mhm.
I'm not sure the Heidi moment in this issue would have been as big or expansive as we've made it by getting more granular and looking at just 5 issues. So I think there's value to this pace in addition to the way the story is unfolding,
Mhm.
and I suspect we're gonna spend some number of issues committed to majority time in the future as opposed to
I,
um
I think the way the story is going, I agree that you feel like there are
and
more
then
questions from the future than there are in we'll just call it the present, right? The present timeline. There are more outstanding questions about what the motivation and what those characters are doing, not what happens, but like what the reaction to it and what caused them, what made them make the bunker. There are more open things on that end than there are in the present timeline because the present timelines because they're the ones asking the questions, just like the audience is.
right.
They're the ones discussing this, being like they're asking the same questions that we are about these future versions of themselves. So I would agree. Getting more time, more information from that side of the timeline is the more interesting side of the story right now.
Absolutely. Do you have anything else for this week?
No, I'm at the end of my notes here. That's all I got.
Great. Me too. And so with that, I will begin our sign off by saying I've got the trades pulled up in front of me, but they do not list the issues. So I'm going to guess it's another 5 issues.
Yes, it is.
So it's going to be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 10
Yes, it
through
is. 10
14.
to,
Yep.
yeah, 10 to 14. Yep.
Um, I know. It's just the math. Like you don't think of 10 to 14 as 5,
Yes.
except when you're reading issues. So anyway, 10 to 14 or volume 3 if you can find it. Which as I'm looking, I looked at mycomicshop.com, which is just one of my like go-to for things site. And right now they have the first 3 volumes in stock. And I noticed last week after our discussion, the website instocktrades.com has all 4 in stock at about 40% off MSRP, which is kind of their thing.
Mhm.
Um, Granted, there's one of those sites like DCBS or somewhere else where they offer you like half off the book and then their shipping just kills you and they never have free shipping.
Yeah, and
Um,
it comes out to like maybe 90% of the cost, which is still less, but like you're not saving as much.
yeah,
It is also available digitally too. Check your library if you have, Hoopla or Libby or whatnot. Or through wherever else you can get digital comics. It is out there, and the trades are probably the ones you can find most readily, like you said, through some sort of online retailer. So, But yeah, you may be able to find the issues if you dig through back bends and dollar boxes and used bookstores and things like that.
Oh, I found an eBay site where they had like 9 of the issues, and I was very tempted. And they were like not expensive, like $3 or less a
Mhm.
piece. But I was like, do I really want to start this another MacGuffin quest for a very difficult book to find in print? Um,
So my my personal rule on things like that, if I'm going to go on a quest like that, is if I can find 50% or greater of a series in one go, I'll do it, and then spend the rest of the time filling out the rest of it. So
the
like
problem is,
19
I
issues,
think this did
I
not
need to
have issues like
like,
1 through 5, which I suspect are the hardest ones to find.
but yes, but if I for this if I could have gotten 10 of the issues, any of the 10 issues all in one go, like I went to like a half price book or something like that, and I found 10 of the issues, I consider buying that and then working away minimum 10 and then work my way to find the other 9, by scouring all the other half price books and flea markets and
Well, and
antique
the
stores
other
and
thing is
things
that
like that.
there's no urgency to it, right? You just log it in your
Well,
app,
exactly. Yeah.
and
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
just the next time you find a comic shop with bins and bins of books, you just
Yep.
start flipping through, and then you say, "Oh, the bunker. I wonder if this is
Yep.
one of the ones I have." And then you just get the little thrill of being one step closer each
What
time.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, but for
Um,
me, I got to start with at least 50%, at least half of the run in one go, if I'm going to go on a quest like that. So,
I think that's an insanely great take. So,
yeah.
if you didn't get anything else out of this discussion, please take that with you. That's a great way to collect books. You can find us on storiedarcs.com, Instagram and Facebook at Storied Arcs, and Blue Sky. It's at Storied Arcs with the Blue Sky gibberish behind it. Eventually, I'll set up like our official domain on there, and because we own storiedarcs.com, there's no reason our username couldn't just be at Storied Arcs.
But just search Story Dark, you'll find it there on Blue
Yeah,
Sky.
you'll find us there. Give us a retweet, give us a like, give us a follow. If you are listening on, I think most of our people listen on Pocket Cast, and I don't know if you can review there, but you can leave reviews on iTunes and Spotify. Please
yep.
leave us a 5-star review. If you don't feel like leaving a 5-star review, then don't leave a review. Just leave it alone. Move on with your day. We don't need that. Anyway, we will see you next week for Volume 3.
Peace.